this Sunday morning with the race for the White House, with the first GOP primary debate now 45 days away. In the coming weeks, Sunday Morning Futures will be speaking to the 2024 candidates about the issues that matter to the American people: the economy, the China threat, education, corruption in Washington, and a lot more. As President Biden this week touted his economic policy, citing so-called Bidenomics as a centerpiece of his campaign for a second term. According to new Fox News polls, however, the message is falling flat with voters. Overwhelmingly, 60% of voters disapprove with the way Biden is handling the economy, which has included trillions of dollars in new spending and plans for higher taxes. The policies have resulted in red-hot inflation not seen in 40 years, with prices on basic essentials spiking and setting interest rates higher, further squeezing American families. The Federal Reserve at this point has raised interest rates 10 times in the last year or so to combat Biden's inflation, which has sent mortgage rates skyrocketing, making a mortgage so much more expensive. Joining me right now in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is one of the leading candidates for the 2024 GOP presidential nomination, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Governor, it's great to see you this morning. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to start off with your plans, why you should be the man running this country in 2025. We're seeing an economy that is slowing down. We see Bidenomics falling flat. What are you going to do to change this story?
Well, I have no interest in managing the decline of this country. I want to reverse the decline. I think Bidenomics really harkens back to the late 1970s and the malaise of the Jimmy Carter era. People were talking about there was an era of limits. People just needed to be willing to make do with less. And Ronald Reagan said, no, that's not acceptable. We can do better. And I think we're in a similar situation here. Bidenomics, at the end of the day, means you pay more for everything. Your standard of living declines. You have less freedom, but the government has much more power. And they want to wield that power over the economy to advance a very liberal political agenda. You also see how this breeds corruption, because you got to bend the knee to be able to qualify for all these different programs. It really empowers corporations who want to side with the regime. So I think it fundamentally needs to be tossed out, and I think we need to put our country on a much different path. For one thing, we need to stop spending so much money. You know, you look at the last 3+ years, this government has borrowed, printed, and spent trillions and trillions of dollars. And you go back to the COVID lockdowns, you know, that really represented the biggest transfer of wealth from middle-class people to big corporations like Amazon and Apple that we've ever seen in American history. That really laid the seeds for the inflation that we're seeing. So you have to get spending under control. You have to open up American domestic energy production. We have an abundance of resources. Stop doing the Green New Deal and let's get serious about producing more oil and gas. You also have to bring this administrative state to heel. The bureaucracy in Washington is totally out of control. It's exerting power that is not there for it under the Constitution. And we need a president to come in and really clean house. And I will do that on day one. And finally, I think we need to recognize this experiment with the CCP over the last 3 decades, where they were granted most favored nation status, put in the World Trade Organization. You know, that's been a failure. We need independence from China. We cannot subcontract out key aspects of our industrial base to a country that doesn't have our interests at heart and that is our #1 geopolitical threat. And we will get that done as well.
And yet Janet Yellen just went to China and bowed to Communist Party officials a couple of weeks after Anthony Blinken pretty much did the same. What are you going to do to stop this aggression from Communist China in your first week in office then? Give us specifics that you want to change with regard to the relationship with China. Will you reverse the most favored nation trade status on China? What else can be done?
So I favor doing that. I think we probably need Congress, but I would take executive action as appropriate to be able to move us in that direction. 2, I would recognize that China is a threat. This idea of the happy talk that you hear from Yellen, oh, we're just, you know, it's a healthy competition. No, they're the #1 geopolitical threat this country faces. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a new commitment to hard power in the Indo-Pacific. At the end of the day, what China respects is strength. And if you're showing strength and we have hard power to back it up, they're going to be much less aggressive. And my fear is under Biden, is his weakness, is really inviting China to do more, not just in their own theater. We see them doing more in our own hemisphere here in the West. And so there'll be a new day on day one. We're going to recognize the threat for what it is, and we're going to take appropriate action.
There is no growth strategy in this administration whatsoever for the economy of the United States. I want to hear your growth strategy right now, Governor. You're talking about reversing this decline in America. Productivity is down. Jobs are still strong. However, there were real holes in that jobs report on Friday, and people are wondering if, in fact, we are dancing right into a recession. What are you going to do specifically in terms of the regulatory backdrop and the taxes that are expected to go higher this year?
All of the Biden bureaucratic regulations will be tossed out. We're going to rip it all out. The Green New Deal, all these things they've done, are bad for growth, and we're going to curtail that. If you look at the agencies, Maria, the agencies in government have grown 50% since 2019. Is there any American that's somehow better off as a result of that? No, it's causing a negative impact. So we're going to do that. The other thing, you mentioned productivity. We need to reorient our education system. We need to stop producing degrees in things like zombie studies where kids are going $100,000 in debt and focus on more concrete skills that can be used in advanced manufacturing as we work to recapture and build a better industrial base. We've done that in Florida. We've doubled apprenticeships. We've created programs in our state colleges so people don't have to go into debt. They can actually get concrete skills and be put in. When you increase productivity, that's one of the best things you can do to drive down inflation. But it really starts with the education system. We need less woke indoctrination, and we need more tangible, real-world skills applied.
Yeah, and you've done a great job pushing back against woke. We know that. But I'm wondering what's going on with your campaign. There was a lot of optimism about you running for president earlier in the year. But here's this weekend's headline from the Politico playbook. Failure to launch. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' campaign to topple Donald Trump has stalled. We are way behind, says a top DeSantis PAC official, sounding the alarm. What happened?
Oh, Maria, these are narratives. The media does not want me to be the nominee. I think that's very, very clear. Why? Because they know I'll beat Biden. But even more importantly, they know I will actually deliver on all these things. We will stop the invasion at the border. We'll take on the drug cartels. We'll curtail the administrative state. We'll get spending under control. We'll do all the things that they don't want to see done. And so they're going to continue doing the type of narrative. I can tell you, we understand this is a state-by-state process. We've had incredible support in the early states, building an organization, signing up the key people that you need to be able to compete in a place like Iowa. We just launched our Mamas movement. My wife was in Iowa with Governor Kim Reynolds launching that. Parents, and particularly moms, I think are going to be the secret weapon, both in this primary and in the general election. Nobody has been a better champion for those folks than me. And I would just also point out, my reelection in Florida, we had the greatest victory that any Republican governor candidate in the history of the state had. And yet a few months before the election, I had media saying that somehow my reelection campaign was stalling, that we weren't doing anything. And so we're doing what it takes to win. It's not a national primary. That's not how these things are going. It's really on the ground in those key states. You got to have the organization. You got to do it. So that's what we focused on. And oh, by the way, we just announced last week better fundraising than any non-incumbent has ever had. If you look at what was reported, it was about $150 million, and that hasn't even been deployed yet. So we've got a long way to go. I'm looking forward to being able to participate in the debates, but this is not something that I ever expected to just snap fingers and all of a sudden you win 7 months before anyone happens. You got to earn it, and you got to work, and it requires a lot of toil and tears and sweat, and we're going to do that.
So you're going to be on that stage for the upcoming first primary GOP debate here on Fox News Live, August 22nd. But I want to look at this poll number as we go into this first primary debate, ask you how you're preparing for the debate. Look where Donald Trump is going into this debate, above 50%. Governor, he's at 56%. You're at 22%, according to this poll. I think one of the reasons that Donald Trump is in the lead is because of the corruption and the unfairness of our justice system. I want to know what you're going to do. What are you going to do about the fact that the FBI worked with Twitter to censor information, amplify lies, and suppress truth? What are you going to do about this influence peddling that we see is in plain sight that the Biden family has been doing allegedly for now more than a decade? What can you do about it to straighten things out, given the fact that the Americans are sick and tired of the corruption they see in plain sight?
We will end the weaponization of government. And that's, of course, a new FBI director on day one. That's a difference between me and Donald Trump. He says the jury's still out on FBI Director Wray. I think you need a new start on day one. We're going to clean house at the Department of Justice. And, you know, I look back at like the Hunter Biden censorship, which was a huge, huge deal to happen in the 2020 election. And yet, you know, those were Donald Trump's own agencies that were colluding with big tech. I would never allow that to happen. I would fire those people immediately. And in fact, in Florida, we've signed legislation that prohibits all state and local government officials in our state from colluding with tech companies to try to censor the political speech of Americans. We're also going to have one standard of justice in this country. And right now, if you're connected to the D.C. elite, like Hunter Biden, I mean, look, if he were a Republican, he would have been in jail years ago, and I think we all know that. But if you're connected to the D.C. ruling class, you're able to get away with conduct that the average American won't. And so what we have is these institutions have been captured by one particular faction of our society, and they wield power against other factions they don't like. And so if you're like a pro-life activist, you may have FBI agents swarm your house, even though you said that you would surrender voluntarily. And so people see that over and over again. But here's what it requires, Maria. Requires a president that is disciplined, a president that is focused. You can't get distracted on this. These people are not going to voluntarily give up the power that they've accumulated over many decades of neglect. I've shown in Florida the ability to get the job done. We've cleaned house in our state, whether it's firing a Soros prosecutor in Tampa, removing a sheriff in Broward. Yep. We take the decisive action necessary, but we've got to get it done this time, because if we don't get it done this time, it's not going to happen.
Will you be on the debate stage next month?
Of course. I look forward to doing it. I think really, Maria, that's when people are really going to start paying attention to the primary. I think up to this point, a lot of that has been about, you know, some of these legal cases, and I think a lot of the voters' concern about that, and understandably so. But I think that's going to be the focus. We're going to be able to talk about the vision, and I look forward to doing it. So I'm glad we're going to get started.
Governor, it's good to talk with you this morning. We'll be watching. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.